The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Willa Wentworth as she clutched the letter in her trembling hands, tears blurring the hateful words her father had written, the final decree that she was no longer welcome in the home where she had spent all 22 years of her life. The parchment crumpled in her grasp as another wave of nausea washed over her, a cruel reminder of the child growing inside her womb and the reason for her banishment from the prosperous Wentworth estate on the outskirts of Deadwood, South Dakota. The year was 1878, and Deadwood had transformed from a lawless mining camp to something resembling civilization, though the rough edges remained. The town was still young, having sprung up just 2 years prior, following the discovery of gold in the Black Hills. The Wentworth family had arrived early, establishing themselves as merchants supplying the miners and settlers who flooded the area. They had built a reputation as upstanding citizens, a reputation Willa had now apparently tarnished beyond repair. "You have brought shame upon this family," her father had thundered earlier that morning, his face contorted with rage. "No daughter of mine would behave so disgracefully. You will leave this house immediately." Her mother had stood silently behind him, eyes downcast, offering neither comfort nor defense. Her younger sister had been forbidden from saying goodbye. The servants had been instructed not to help her pack the small trunk that now sat at her feet on the dusty road leading into town. Willa wiped her tears with the back of her hand, straightening her shoulders. She had expected anger when she revealed her condition, but not this complete severing of ties. She had naively believed that her family's love would withstand even this scandal. She had been wrong. The father of her child was long gone. A charming visitor to Deadwood who had promised her the world, wooed her with sweet words, and disappeared back east once he had taken what he wanted. By the time Willa realized she was with child, there was no trace of him to be found. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. A rider was approaching from the direction of town, the late afternoon sun casting a silhouette in sharp relief against the dusty horizon. Willa quickly tucked the letter into her pocket and attempted to compose herself, though she knew her red-rimmed eyes and the trunk at her feet told their own story. The rider slowed as he approached, and Willa could make out a lean, sun-bronzed man atop a dappled gray horse. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants tucked into well-used boots, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded piercing green eyes. He wasn't a miner or a gambler, but something about him spoke of a life lived outdoors, under wide skies. "Miss? Are you all right?" His voice was deep with a slight drawl that suggested he wasn't native to the Dakota Territory. "I'm fine," Willa replied automatically, her voice betraying her with a slight quaver. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be tall and broad-shouldered. His face was handsome in a weathered way, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. "Pardon me for saying so, but you don't look fine," he said, approaching slowly as if afraid of startling her. "Are you in need of assistance?" Willa opened her mouth to refuse, to insist she could manage on her own, but instead, to her mortification, a sob escaped. She pressed her hand to her mouth, embarrassed by this display in front of a stranger. The man's expression softened. "I'm Owen Everett," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. "I work at the Blackwater Ranch just outside of town. Whatever trouble you're in, perhaps I can help?" "There's nothing anyone can do," Willa said, regaining some composure. "But thank you, Mr. Everett. Just Owen, please." He looked at her trunk, then back at the road that led to the Wentworth estate, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "You're Thomas Wentworth's daughter, aren't you? I recognize you from town." Willa nodded. Seeing no point in denying it, news would spread quickly enough. "You're leaving home?" he asked, his tone careful, non-judgmental. "I've been told to leave," Willa replied, lifting her chin slightly. "My father has made it clear I am no longer welcome." Owen's brow furrowed. "That's a mighty harsh decision. Do you have somewhere to go?" The simple question undid her. Willa had been so consumed by the shock of her banishment that she hadn't fully considered what would come next. She had some money saved, not much, but enough for a few nights at a boarding house while she figured out her next steps. But after that, what respectable establishment would employ an unmarried woman with child? "I thought I might find lodging in town," she said, her voice small. "At least for tonight." Owen shook his head. "The mining companies brought in a new batch of workers yesterday. Every room in Deadwood is taken, and those that aren't—" He trailed off, but Willa understood. The remaining establishments were no place for a woman alone, especially one in her condition. "I see," she said, feeling the last of her composure threatening to crumble. Owen looked at her for a long moment, then glanced back at the Wentworth estate. "Your family threw you out because you're expecting," he said, a statement rather than a question. Willa's hand unconsciously moved to her still flat stomach. There was no hiding it now. "Yes." His jaw tightened, and something like anger flashed in his eyes. "The shame belongs to them alone," he said firmly. "Not to you, and certainly not to the innocent child you're carrying." The unexpected defense brought fresh tears to Willa's eyes. In the hours since her father had discovered her secret, she had heard nothing but condemnation. "Mrs. Callahan at the ranch where I work sometimes takes in boarders," Owen continued. "She's a good woman, discreet and kind-hearted. She might have space for you, at least until you can make more permanent arrangements. I couldn't impose. It's no imposition. I'm headed back there now." He gestured to the trunk. "May I?" Willa hesitated, then nodded. What choice did she have? Night would fall soon, and she had nowhere else to go. Owen effortlessly lifted her trunk and secured it to his horse. "Can you ride?" he asked, turning back to her. "Yes, but don't worry about Penny here. She's gentle as they come," he offered his hand. "I'll walk alongside, lead her steady." Willa placed her hand in his and allowed him to help her onto the horse. His hands were strong but careful, and for the first time since her father's verdict, she felt a small measure of safety. As they began the journey toward the Blackwater Ranch, the sun sinking lower on the horizon, Willa couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had placed this stranger in her path at precisely her darkest moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Owen glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes the good Lord puts us where we need to be," he said simply. "Even if we don't understand why at the time." Willa nodded, hoping fervently that he was right. The Blackwater Ranch came into view as twilight descended, a sprawling property nestled against the foothills. A large main house stood at the center, with several smaller cabins scattered around it. Lanterns glowed in windows, creating warm islands of light in the gathering darkness. "Mr. Blackwater runs one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory," Owen explained as they approached. "Started from nothing 10 years ago and built it all up. He's a fair man to work for." "And Mrs. Callahan?" Willa asked, anxiety creeping back into her voice. "She keeps the house and looks after the hands. Lost her husband in the war and came out west for a fresh start. She's stern but has a good heart." As they reached the main house, a stout woman with silver-streaked hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. "Owen Everett, you're late for supper again," she called out, her Irish accent still strong despite years in America. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Willa. "And who might this be?" Owen helped Willa dismount before answering. "Mrs. Callahan, this is Miss Willa Wentworth. She's in need of lodging. I thought you might be able to help." Mrs. Callahan's shrewd eyes took in everything: Willa's fine clothes, her tear-stained face, the single trunk. Understanding dawned in her expression. "Come inside, child," she said, her tone softening. "No need to stand about in the night air." Relief washed over Willa. She followed Mrs. Callahan into the house, with Owen carrying her trunk behind them. The interior was warm and homey, with a large kitchen dominated by a well-used table. The smells of stew and fresh bread filled the air. "Sit yourself down," Mrs. Callahan instructed, gesturing to the table. "When did you last eat?" Willa realized she hadn't had a morsel since breakfast. "This morning," she admitted. "That won't do." Mrs. Callahan bustled about, setting a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread before her. "Eat while we talk." Owen set the trunk down by the door. "I should see to Penny," he said. "There's a plate keeping warm for you in the oven," Mrs. Callahan told him. "Don't be long." After he left, Mrs. Callahan sat across from Willa. "Now then," Owen didn't say much, but I can guess. "Your family turned you out?" Willa nodded, taking a spoonful of the rich stew. It was delicious, and she suddenly realized how hungry she was. "Because of the baby?" Willa's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "How did you know?" "I've been on this earth long enough to recognize the signs, especially in a young woman arriving with a single trunk and eyes full of heartbreak." Mrs. Callahan's gaze was direct but not unkind. "How far along?" "About 3 months," Willa said quietly. "My father only found out today." "And the father?" "Gone. Back east, I believe. He wasn't who I thought he was." Mrs. Callahan nodded, unsurprised. They rarely are, these charming types. She studied Willa thoughtfully. "I have a small room at the back of the house. It's yours if you want it, for as long as you need." "I can pay," Willa said quickly. "I have some money saved, and I can work. We'll sort that out tomorrow." Mrs. Callahan reached across the table to pat her hand. "Tonight, you eat and rest. Everything looks better in the morning light." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes again, this time from gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Mrs. Callahan said with a wry smile. "You haven't seen how early we rise around here." Owen returned as Willa was finishing her meal. He'd washed up, his hair damp at the temples, and had changed into a clean shirt. He took a seat at the table with his own plate of stew. "Mrs. Callahan tell you about the rooster?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "Meanest bird in the territory. Thinks Dawn should come around 4 in the morning." Despite everything, Willa found herself smiling. "I've always been an early riser." "Good," Mrs. Callahan said approvingly. "You can help with breakfast then." After the meal, Mrs. Callahan showed Willa to the promised room. It was small but neat, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window that would catch the morning sun. "It's not what you're used to, I expect," Mrs. Callahan said. "It's perfect," Willa replied honestly. After the events of the day, the simple room felt like a sanctuary. Mrs. Callahan nodded, satisfied. "Sleep well, child. Tomorrow's another day." Left alone, Willa unpacked the few possessions she'd managed to bring: several dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small Bible that had belonged to her grandmother, and a locket containing a miniature portrait of her mother. Everything else had been left behind. As she prepared for bed, Willa caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror above the chest of drawers. She looked pale and tired, but somehow different, as if the events of the day had transformed her in some fundamental way. The protected daughter of Thomas Wentworth was gone. Who she would become now remained to be seen. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, distant cattle lowing, the creak of the house settling, the soft hooting of an owl, Willa placed her hand on her stomach. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child. "Somehow, we'll be all right." She fell asleep thinking of green eyes and a deep voice saying, "The shame belongs to them alone." Morning arrived with the promised crowing of the rooster, followed shortly by a soft knock at her door. Willa, who had been awake watching the first light filter through the small window, called out, "Come in." Mrs. Callahan entered, already dressed and bustling with energy. "Good, you're awake. Breakfast needs starting, and I could use the help." Willa dressed quickly in one of her simpler gowns and followed Mrs. Callahan to the kitchen. Under the older woman's efficient direction, she helped prepare a substantial breakfast for the ranch hands: eggs, bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee. The work was unfamiliar but not unwelcome, giving her hands something to do and her mind a respite from her troubles. The ranch hands began filing in as the food was set out. A dozen men of varying ages, all nodding respectfully to Mrs. Callahan and casting curious but polite glances at Willa. Owen was among the last to enter, fresh from the stables with the scent of horses and morning air clinging to him. "Miss Wentworth, He greeted her with a slight tip of his hat. "I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," she replied, surprised to find it was true. Despite everything, exhaustion had granted her a dreamless sleep. "Good." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be heading into town today. If there's anything you need or any messages you'd like delivered." Willa understood what he was offering, a chance to communicate with her family. She shook her head. "There's nothing, but thank you for the thought." Breakfast proceeded with the easy camaraderie of men who worked closely together. Willa remained quiet, absorbing the dynamics of the ranch. This world of physical labor and straightforward interactions was so different from the polite society she'd been raised in. After the men had gone out to their day's work, Mrs. Callahan sat Willa down at the now empty table. "Now then," she said briskly, "let's talk about what's to be done. You can stay here as long as needed, but I imagine you'll want to make your own way eventually." "Yes," Willa agreed. "I don't wish to be a burden." "Nonsense. Extra hands are never a burden. The question is what you can do." Mrs. Callahan's practical approach was oddly comforting. "Can you cook?" "Some basic dishes," Willa admitted. "My mother believed a lady should understand the workings of a kitchen, even if she never had to use that knowledge." "Can you sew?" "Yes, quite well, actually." "Read and write?" "Of course." Mrs. Callahan nodded, considering. "There's always need for someone who can handle correspondence and keep ledgers. Mr. Blackwater's business has grown beyond what he can manage himself, and there's mending to be done. The hands are constantly tearing their clothes. Between that and helping me with meals, you can earn your keep until the baby comes." It was a generous offer, and Willa knew it. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. I'll work hard, I promise." "I know you will." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "My sister was in a similar situation once back in Ireland. No one would help her. I won't be that person, turning away someone in need." Willa swallowed hard. "I don't know how to repay such kindness." "Live a good life. Be a good mother. That's payment enough." Mrs. Callahan stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Now, let me show you what needs doing with the mending." The days that followed established a new rhythm for Willa. She rose early to help with breakfast, spent the mornings assisting Mrs. Callahan with household tasks, and the afternoons working on mending or helping Mr. Blackwater with his correspondence and ledgers. The elderly rancher had been startled by her appearance at first, but quickly came to appreciate her neat handwriting and quick mind. "Should have hired someone to help with the books years ago," he grumbled after she reorganized his chaotic filing system. "Been losing money without knowing it." The work kept her busy, which was a blessing. When her hands and mind were occupied, she had less time to dwell on her family's rejection or worry about her uncertain future. Owen Everett remained a steady presence. As the ranch foreman, he worked closely with Mr. Blackwater, which meant Willa saw him regularly. He was unfailingly polite, checking in on her welfare without prying into her affairs. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, thoughtful, perhaps, or concerned. 2 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Willa was hanging laundry in the yard when a familiar carriage appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Her heart lurched painfully as she recognized her father's driver at the reins. Owen, who was mending a fence nearby, noticed her reaction. He straightened, dropping his tools, and moved to stand beside her. "Your family?" he asked quietly. Willa nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Had they come to bring her home, or to cause more pain? The carriage stopped in front of the main house, and to Willa's surprise, it was her mother who emerged, looking pale and drawn. Martha Wentworth was a handsome woman in her 40s, always impeccably dressed and composed. Today, however, her hands twisted nervously at her handkerchief as her gaze found Willa. "I'll leave you to speak privately," Owen said, starting to move away. "No," Willa said quickly, reaching out to grasp his arm. "Please stay." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Martha Wentworth approached slowly, her expression a mixture of concern and apprehension. "Willa," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you look well." "I am well, Mother," Willa replied, letting go of Owen's arm but drawing comfort from his continued presence. Why are you here? To see that you're safe. I've been so worried. Her mother's eyes darted to Owen, then back to Willa. Might we speak alone? This is Owen Everett, the ranch foreman, Willa said, deliberately ignoring the request. He's the one who brought me here when I had nowhere else to go. Her mother had the grace to look ashamed. I see. Thank you, Mr. Everett, for assisting my daughter. Owen touched the brim of his hat. It was the right thing to do, madam. Martha Wentworth's lips thinned slightly at his implied criticism. Willa, your father doesn't know I've come. He remains firm in his decision, but perhaps in time. In time what, mother? Willa interrupted, surprising herself with the edge in her voice. In time he'll forgive me, accept his grandchild, the same grandchild he called a bastard and a stain on the family name? Her mother flinched. Please understand, the shock was great. Your father has always been concerned with the family's standing in the community. More than his own daughter's welfare, clearly. Willa's hand went protectively to her stomach. I won't return to a home where my child isn't welcome. Then at least let me help you, her mother pleaded, opening her reticule to withdraw an envelope. I've brought some money. Keep it, Willa said firmly. I'm earning my own way here. Martha looked stricken. Willa, please don't be stubborn. Your condition. My condition is perfectly normal, mother. Women have been bearing children since the beginning of time, many in far less comfortable circumstances than mine. Owen cleared his throat softly. Mrs. Wentworth, I assure you, your daughter is well cared for here. Mrs. Callahan has taken her under her wing, and Mr. Blackwater values her assistance with the ranch business. Martha Wentworth looked at Owen with new interest. You seem very concerned for my daughter's welfare, Mr. Everett. Everyone at Blackwater Ranch looks after their own, madam, he replied evenly. There was a moment of silence as Martha absorbed his words. I see, she said finally. She turned back to Willa. If you need anything at all, send word to me directly, not through your father. Willa felt her anger softening at the genuine concern in her mother's eyes. I will, she promised. And may I visit again? To see how you're faring? The request surprised Willa. If you wish, she said cautiously. Her mother nodded, relief evident in her face. She hesitated, then stepped forward to embrace Willa briefly. Take care of yourself, she whispered, and the little one. After Martha Wentworth had departed, Willa stood watching the carriage disappear down the road, emotions warring within her. You all right? Owen asked gently. I think so, she replied, wiping away a stray tear. It's just, I never expected any of them to reach out, especially not my mother. She's always deferred to my father in everything. It takes courage to go against family, Owen said. Even more to do what's right when everyone around you says it's wrong. Willa looked at him curiously. You sound like you speak from experience. A shadow passed over his face. Perhaps another time, he said, his tone making it clear the subject was closed for now. Come on, I reckon Mrs. Callahan will have lunch ready soon. The encounter with her mother left Willa thoughtful. The absolute rejection she had felt was now tempered by the knowledge that at least one member of her family still cared for her welfare. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was something. As June turned to July, the summer heat settled over the Dakota Territory. Willa's condition became more noticeable, her dresses needing adjustment to accommodate her growing belly. Mrs. Callahan helped her alter her clothing, working with her in the evenings by lamplight. My sister carried high like you, the housekeeper commented one evening as they sewed. Had a boy, she did, strong as an ox now. Willa smiled, running her hand over the swell of her stomach. I wonder sometimes, boy or girl, I try to imagine their face. Either way, a blessing, Mrs. Callahan said firmly, despite what some might say. Over these weeks, Willa found herself growing closer to Owen. Their encounters were frequent but brief, a few words exchanged at meals, moments of conversation as he passed through the house on ranch business, occasional assistance offered when she was carrying something heavy. One evening in late July, Willa was sitting on the porch after supper, enjoying the cooler air as twilight descended. The ranch hands had dispersed to their own pursuits, some to town, others to the bunkhouse for card games or early sleep. She was alone with her thoughts when Owen appeared, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. "Thought you might be thirsty," he said, offering her one of the glasses. "Thank you." She smiled, taking the cool drink gratefully. He settled on the step below her, his long legs stretched out before him. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky and the first stars appear. "Mrs. Callahan says you're doing well with the books," Owen said eventually. "Mr. Blackwater's mighty impressed." "It's not difficult work, just tedious at times. But I enjoy the order of it, everything in its proper place." "Unlike life," Owen observed with a wry smile. "Indeed." Willa took a sip of her lemonade. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "That first day, on the road, you could have ridden past. Many would have. Why did you stop?" Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "My mother always said you can judge a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him in return," he finally answered. "I saw someone in trouble, and I had the means to help. It seemed simple enough at the time." "And now? Does it still seem simple?" His green eyes met hers, earnest in the deepening twilight. "Some things in life are complicated. Doing right by others shouldn't be one of them." The simplicity of his moral code touched her. In the society she'd grown up in, everything was layered with subterfuge and social calculation. Owen's straightforward decency was refreshing. "You mentioned once that you understood what it's like to go against family," Willa said carefully. "Would you tell me about that?" Owen was silent for so long that she thought he might refuse. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "My father was a hard man, believed in discipline above all else, especially for sons. My older brother William followed in his footsteps, became the son my father wanted. I couldn't." He took a drink of his lemonade. "I questioned things, asked why we did things certain ways. My father saw it as defiance." "Was it?" A smile touched his lips. "Sometimes. But mostly I just wanted to understand. When I was 17, there was a dispute with a neighboring ranch over water rights. My father and brother wanted to settle it with guns. I suggested talking to a lawyer first." "A reasonable suggestion," Willa noted. "Not to my father. Said I was weak, not man enough to defend what was ours." Owen's jaw tightened at the memory. "When I refused to ride with them to confront our neighbors, my father told me I wasn't his son anymore, said I should be gone by the time they returned." "That's terrible," Willa breathed. "I left that night, worked my way west, ranch to ranch, learning the trade on my own terms. Ended up here 5 years ago." He shrugged. "Mr. Blackwater saw something in me worth investing in. Made me foreman 2 years back. Have you ever spoken to your family since?" "Wrote to my mother a few times. She responded once, letting me know my father had died. Heart gave out 3 years after I left. William runs the ranch now." "I'm sorry about your father," Willa said softly. "Thank you. But I made my peace with it long ago." He looked at her directly. "That's why I said what I did that day, about shame belonging to those who cast out their own. I know what it's like to be judged for making choices others don't understand." The parallel between their situations wasn't perfect. Willa's pregnancy had been a mistake, not a principled stand, but the experience of family rejection created a bond of understanding between them. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Thank you for listening." He stood, taking her empty glass. "It's getting late. You should rest." As he turned to go, Willa called after him, "Owen?" He paused, looking back at her. "I'm glad you stopped that day." His smile was warm in the gathering darkness. "So am I, Willa. So am I." August brought relentless heat in the busiest season on the ranch. Cattle needed to be moved to better grazing lands, repairs made before winter, and preparations begun for the fall drive to market. Everyone worked longer hours, including Willa, who now handled almost all of Mr. Blackwater's correspondence and financial matters. Her mother visited twice more, bringing baby clothes she had sewn in secret and news from town. Thomas Wentworth remained intractable, but Willa's younger sister had been asking questions, challenging their father in small ways that surprised everyone. "She has more of your spirit than I realized," Martha Wentworth said during her last visit. "Perhaps she'll fare better for it than I did." Willa's relationship with Owen continued to deepen, though neither of them acknowledged the growing attraction between them. They found moments to talk over meals, during brief respites from work, occasionally in the evening on the porch. She learned about his dreams of having his own ranch someday, his love of horses, his quiet faith that had sustained him through difficult times. He learned about her passion for reading, her skill with numbers, her determination to provide a good life for her child, despite the circumstances. As her pregnancy progressed, Owen's protectiveness became more evident. He insisted on carrying anything heavy, made sure she took breaks when working, and once rode 15 miles to fetch the doctor when she experienced false labor pains that frightened everyone at the ranch. One afternoon in early September, Willa was working in the small vegetable garden behind the main house when Owen approached. He looked serious, almost nervous. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "Of course." Willa straightened as best she could with her now prominent belly and brushed dirt from her hands. "I've been thinking," he began, then paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Your time is getting close." Willa nodded. The baby was due in late October, just over a month away. "I've been saving," Owen continued, "for my own place someday. I have enough now for a small start, nothing fancy, but a solid piece of land north of here with a decent cabin. Good water source. Room to grow." Willa's heart began to beat faster, though she wasn't sure why. "That's wonderful, Owen. You'll make a fine rancher on your own." "The thing is," he said, removing his hat and turning it in his hands, "I've been thinking about you. And the baby." "Oh." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Life's going to be hard for you both. An unmarried mother and her child. People can be cruel." His green eyes met hers, steady and sincere. "It doesn't have to be that way." Willa's breath caught as the understanding dawned. "Owen, are you—" "I'm asking if you'd consider marrying me, Willa." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's sudden, and I know the child isn't mine, but I'd raise it as my own. I'd be a good father, I promise you that." Tears sprang to Willa's eyes. "But why? Why would you take on such a burden?" "You're not a burden," he said firmly. "Neither is your child. And as for why—" He took a deep breath. "Because I care for you, Willa, more than I thought possible when I found you on that road. I admire your strength, your kindness, your determination. I believe we could build a good life together, if you're willing." Willa was overwhelmed. Owen was offering her respectability, security, a father for her child, things she had thought lost to her forever. But was it fair to him to accept such a sacrifice from a man who deserved a wife who came to him without complications? "This is, unexpected," she managed. "I know, and I don't expect an answer right away." Owen replaced his hat. "Take some time to think about it. Talk to Mrs. Callahan if that helps. I just wanted you to know that there's another path available to you, if you want it." With that, he nodded respectfully and walked away, leaving Willa standing in the garden with her thoughts in turmoil. That evening, Willa sought out Mrs. Callahan. The older woman listened without interruption as Willa explained Owen's proposal and her conflicted feelings. "He's a good man," Mrs. Callahan said when Willa had finished. "One of the best I've known. He wouldn't have asked if he wasn't sincere." "I know that," Willa agreed. "But is it fair to him to accept such an offer when the child I'm carrying belongs to another man? Life isn't about what's fair, child. It's about what's right." Mrs. Callahan's weathered hands folded around her teacup. "The question isn't whether it's fair to him. He's a grown man who knows his own mind. The question is whether you could be a good wife to him, whether you could build a life together based on mutual respect and affection." "I care for him deeply," Willa admitted, "more than I thought possible after what happened with the baby's father." "That's a start. A better start than many marriages have." Mrs. Callahan's eyes were kind but direct. "Do you think you could come to love him?" The question brought Willa up short. Love? She hadn't allowed herself to think in those terms, not after her disastrous experience with the charming Easterner who had fathered her child. But Owen was different, steady, honest, compassionate. "I think perhaps I already do," she whispered, the realization dawning as she spoke the words. Mrs. Callahan smiled, satisfied. "Then I believe you have your answer." The next day, Willa found Owen working in the stables. He looked up as she approached, his expression carefully neutral, though she could see the hope in his eyes. "I've thought about your proposal," she said without preamble. "And?" His voice was steady, but his hands stilled on the saddle he was mending. "Before I give you my answer, I need to be sure of something." Willa took a deep breath. "Is this offer made out of pity or obligation because you were the one who found me that day?" "Neither," Owen said firmly. "I won't pretend your situation didn't initially move me to compassion, but what I feel for you now goes far beyond that. I'm asking you to be my wife because I believe we could build something good together, a family, a home, a life. Because when I think about my future, I want you in it." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "Then yes," she said, "I would be honored to be your wife, Owen Everett." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He closed the distance between them and, after a moment's hesitation, took her hands in his. "I'll do right by you, Willa. By you and the child. That's my solemn promise." "I know you will," she said, smiling through tears of relief and happiness. "And I'll do right by you too." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Mr. Blackwater gave the bride away, Mrs. Callahan served as witness, and the local minister presided. The ranch hands attended, along with a few neighbors, and to Willa's surprise, her mother and younger sister, who had defied Thomas Wentworth to come. "He'll be furious," her sister whispered as she embraced Willa after the ceremony. "But I don't care. I've missed you so much." "Will you be all right, going back to him?" Willa asked, concerned. "Don't worry about me. I'm learning from your courage." Her sister smiled mischievously. "Besides, I've been saving my pin money. In a year or so, I might just come join you out here in the wild." Willa's mother was more subdued, but seemed genuinely pleased for her daughter. "Mr. Everett appears to be a good man," she observed, watching Owen as he spoke with the ranch hands. "A man of substance, if not fortune." "He is the best of men," Willa said simply, "and we'll make our own fortune together." Martha Wentworth's eyes grew sad. "I wish I'd had your courage, Willa, to choose my own path." "It's never too late to find that courage." "Mother?" The new couple moved to Owen's property the day after the wedding. The cabin was rustic but sound, with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. Owen had prepared it as best he could, with the help of some of the Blackwater hands. There was a new cook stove, curtains Mrs. Callahan had sewn as a wedding gift, and a cradle Owen had crafted himself for the coming baby. "It's not what you're used to," he said apologetically as he carried Willa over the threshold. "It's perfect," she replied, meaning it. "It's ours." The first weeks of marriage were a time of adjustment for both of them. They were still learning each other's habits, preferences, and moods. Owen was considerate of Willa's condition, never pressuring her for more intimacy than she was comfortable with. Their relationship developed gradually shared meals, conversations by the fire, the daily work of establishing their home. October brought cooler weather and the imminent arrival of the baby. Owen hired a midwife from town to stay with them as the time grew near. Mrs. Callahan also visited frequently, bringing food and advice in equal measure. It was on a clear, crisp morning in late October that Willa's labor began. Owen, who had been preparing to ride out to check on their small herd of cattle, was immediately at her side. "Should I fetch the doctor?" he asked, his face pale with concern. "There's no time for that," the midwife said calmly. "This baby's coming fast. You best wait outside, Mr. Everett. We'll call if we need you." The hours that followed were the most difficult of Willa's life. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined, and there were moments when she feared she wouldn't survive it. But the midwife was skilled and steady, and Mrs. Callahan, who had arrived shortly after the labor began, provided encouragement and support. As the sun was setting, Willa gave birth to a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the world with impressive volume. The midwife cleaned him, wrapped him in a blanket, and placed him in Willa's arms. "He's perfect," Willa whispered, gazing at her son's tiny features. The love that flooded through her was overwhelming, washing away any lingering shame or regret about the circumstances of his conception. "Shall I bring in your husband?" Mrs. Callahan asked. Willa nodded, suddenly anxious. How would Owen react to the child? He had promised to raise it as his own, but facing the reality of another man's son might be different from the abstract idea. Owen entered the room cautiously. His eyes went first to Willa, scanning her face with concern, then to the bundle in her arms. He approached slowly, as if afraid of intruding. "Come meet your son," Willa said softly. Owen knelt beside the bed, his expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty as he gazed at the newborn. The baby chose that moment to open his eyes dark blue, as all newborns are, and seemed to look directly at Owen. "Hello, little one," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out tentatively, and the baby grasped his finger with surprising strength. Owen looked up at Willa, his eyes shining. "He's incredible. Would you like to hold him?" Owen nodded, and Willa carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The sight of her strong, capable husband cradling her son with such gentleness brought fresh tears to her eyes. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Callahan asked from the doorway. Willa and Owen exchanged a look. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. "I was thinking William," Willa said, "after your brother." Owen looked surprised, then deeply moved. "William," he repeated softly, testing the name. "William Everett. It's a good, strong name." "William Thomas Everett," Willa amended, "for your brother and my father. Despite everything, I want him to know his heritage on both sides." Owen nodded, understanding. "William Thomas it is." As the midwife and Mrs. Callahan discreetly left the room, Owen settled on the edge of the bed, still holding the baby. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For bringing this little miracle into the world, for trusting me to be his father." He leaned down to press a gentle kiss to Willa's forehead. "For being my wife." "Thank you for finding me that day," she replied, "for saying those words that gave me hope when I had none." "The shame belongs to them alone," Owen quoted softly. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. There is no shame in this beautiful child, or in you for bringing him into the world." As if in agreement, little William made a small, contented sound and nestled closer to Owen's chest. In that moment, Willa knew with absolute certainty that they were a family not in the way she had once expected, perhaps, but real and true nonetheless. Winter came early that year, with heavy snowfalls by mid-November. The small cabin became a cozy haven against the harsh Dakota weather. William thrived, growing stronger each day. Owen proved to be a natural father, taking his turn with nighttime feedings and changing, never showing any hesitation or resentment toward the child who wasn't his by blood. During those long winter evenings, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Owen and Willa's relationship deepened. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. Physical intimacy developed naturally between them, tender and respectful at first, growing more passionate as Willa healed from childbirth and their trust in each other solidified. "I never expected to find this," Owen confessed one night as they lay together, William sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "A wife, a son, a home that's truly mine." "Nor did I," Willa replied, nestled against his chest. "Especially not after everything." "Do you ever think about him? The baby's father?" Owen's voice held no accusation, only gentle curiosity. Willa considered the question honestly. "Sometimes, but not in the way you might think. I don't miss him or wish things had been different with him. I just wonder if he ever thinks about what he left behind, if he knows or cares that he has a son." "His loss," Owen said simply. "He missed out on the greatest blessing a man could have." The winter passed in a peaceful rhythm of domestic life, interrupted occasionally by visits from neighbors or trips into town when the weather permitted. In February, to Willa's surprise, a letter arrived from her father. "He wants to meet his grandson," she told Owen after reading it, her voice unsteady. "He says he's been doing a lot of thinking, that Mother and Emily have helped him see things differently." "Do you want to see him?" Owen asked, watching her carefully. "I don't know," Willa admitted. "Part of me wants to refuse, to make him feel the rejection he dealt to me, but another part wants William to know his grandfather," Owen finished for her, "and perhaps to heal the breach, if that's possible." "Yes," she looked at Owen gratefully. "What do you think I should do?" "I think," he said thoughtfully, "that grudges are heavy things to carry through life. If there's a chance for reconciliation, it might be worth taking. But," he added firmly, "I'll support whatever decision you make." After much consideration, Willa wrote back to her father, inviting him to visit when the spring thaw made travel easier. The months passed, and as March turned to April, the snow began to melt, revealing the first hints of green beneath. Thomas Wentworth arrived on a mild April day, looking older and more subdued than Willa remembered. He stood awkwardly on their porch, hat in hand, his eyes taking in the modest but well-kept cabin and the small herd of cattle visible in the distance. "Father?" Willa greeted him, William on her hip. "Willa." His voice was gruff with emotion. "You look well." "I am well." She stepped back. "Please come in." Owen was waiting inside, standing tall and straight. The two men measured each other with their eyes. "Mr. Wentworth," Owen said, extending his hand, "welcome to our home." After a moment's hesitation, Thomas took the offered hand. "Mr. Everett, I understand I have you to thank for taking care of my daughter when I failed to do so." "Willa has been a blessing to me," Owen replied evenly, "as has our son." Thomas's gaze shifted to William, who was watching the stranger curiously from his mother's arms. Something softened in the older man's face. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms tentatively. Willa carefully transferred William to his grandfather. Thomas held the child awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as William grabbed at his beard with fascination. "He has your eyes," Thomas said quietly to Willa. "Your mother's chin, though." "Would you like some coffee, Father?" Willa asked, moved by the sight of her father holding her son. "Please." They sat at the small kitchen table. The conversation stilted at first, but gradually easing as Thomas asked about the ranch, their plans for expansion, William's development. Owen answered most of the questions about the ranch, his knowledge and confidence clearly impressing his father-in-law. Finally, as William began to fuss for his afternoon feeding, Thomas cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Willa. What I did, the way I treated you, it was wrong. I was so concerned with what people would think that I forgot what truly matters." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes. "Thank you, Father. That means a great deal to me." "Your mother and sister have hardly let me forget my failings," he continued with a rueful smile. "They've been quite persistent in their arguments on your behalf." "I'm glad to hear it," Willa said, smiling through her tears. "I'd like, if you're willing, to be part of your lives, yours and William's, and yours too, of course, Mr. Everett." "Owen, please," her husband said, "and we would be honored to have you as part of our family, sir." Thomas nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you." He handed William back to Willa. "He's a fine boy. You've done well, both of you." As the sun began to set, Thomas prepared to depart for town, where he would spend the night at the hotel before returning to Deadwood the next day. "You must all come visit soon," he said as Owen helped him into his coat. "Your mother and sister would be overjoyed to see you, and I would be proud to introduce my grandson to our friends and neighbors." The significance of this statement wasn't lost on Willa. Her father was publicly acknowledging William, regardless of the circumstances of his birth. "We'll come," she promised. After her father had gone, Willa stood on the porch, watching his carriage disappear down the road. Owen joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked. Better than all right, she replied, leaning against him. I never thought I'd see this day. People can change, Owen said, when they're given reason to. You gave me that chance, Willa said, turning to face him. That day on the road. You saw someone worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. I saw you, Willa, just you. He cupped her face gently. And I thank God every day that I did. As the last light of day painted the western sky in shades of gold and purple, Willa stood in the circle of her husband's arms, their son sleeping peacefully inside. The road ahead would have its challenges building their ranch, raising their family, navigating the complex relationships with her parents, but she faced it now with hope and confidence. She thought back to that terrible day almost a year ago when she had stood alone on a dusty road, cast out and shamed. How different everything looked now from this vantage point of love and acceptance. The words Owen had spoken then had been a lifeline, a promise of a different perspective. The shame belongs to them alone. He had been right. There was no shame in love, in family, in forgiveness, only the blessing of each new day together. Come inside, Owen said softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It's getting cool, and tomorrow will be a busy day. Hand in hand they walked back into their home, closing the door on the gathering darkness and stepping into the warm light of their shared future. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Owen and Willa's small cattle operation grew steadily, allowing them to expand their land holdings and build a larger home adjacent to the original cabin. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's thoughtful nature and his adoptive father's love of the outdoors. In the summer of 1882, Willa gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Margaret, who brought new joy and considerable chaos to the Everett household. Owen doted on all 3 children equally, never once giving anyone reason to think that William wasn't his own flesh and blood. Relations with the Wentworth family had been fully mended. Thomas Wentworth, much softened by his role as grandfather, became a frequent visitor to the ranch. He even invested in Owen's operation, enabling faster growth than they could have managed alone. Martha Wentworth taught Willa's daughters to play piano on the small instrument she gifted them for their 3rd birthday. Willa's sister Emily, true to her word, had left home at 18 to seek adventure in the West, and now worked as a school teacher in Deadwood, riding out to visit her nieces and nephew whenever she could. Mrs. Callahan remained a beloved friend and honorary grandmother to the children. Mr. Blackwater, now in his 70s, but still sharp as ever, took particular interest in William, teaching the boy about cattle and horses whenever he visited. On a warm evening in the summer of 1884, as Willa sat on the porch of their home watching Owen play with the children in the yard, she reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. The shame and fear of that day when her family had cast her out seemed like another lifetime. "Mama, look!" William called, proudly displaying a small wooden horse Owen had carved for him. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she called back, smiling as the twins immediately demanded horses of their own, and Owen promised to make them each one. Later, after the children were asleep, Owen joined Willa on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade, just as he had that night long ago when they first began to know each other's hearts. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her. "Completely," she answered truthfully, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You know, I've been thinking about that day we met. How different everything would be if I'd taken another road, or if you'd been too proud to accept help." "I think about that too," Willa admitted, "how close I came to missing all of this." "I believe we were meant to find each other," Owen said simply, "that God had a hand in putting me on that road at that exact moment." Willa smiled, watching the fireflies begin to dance in the gathering dusk. "I believe that too." They sat together in comfortable silence, bearing witness to the beauty of the life they had built from such unlikely beginnings, a banished daughter, a compassionate cowboy, and words of truth spoken at exactly the right moment. The shame belongs to them alone. But there was no shame here, not anymore. Only love, family, and the promise of many more years together under the vast Dakota sky.